The Office of the Parliament celebrates International Women's Day 2023. DigitALL, Innovation and Technology for Gender Equality. Her fascination with the skies never dimmed. This woman is now encouraging girls to get into the field of astronomy. When did you recognize your love for astronomy?
You know, as far back as I can remember, the skies have fascinated me. Honestly, I grew up as a little girl in India, and in the village, I might have been about 5. Looking up, the stars were just stunning. But really, the clearer memories are like when I was in Trinidad, age 7, my first book that I got in school was called The Night Sky. And that had such an influence on me. And you know, at home, my father was actually very much into photography, and there were binoculars and so on around. One day, I took up the binoculars and I looked up at the moon. And you know what? Since then, I've never looked back down. So it has been a childhood fascination that never left me.
Tell us about your specialization or areas of interest.
So when this field of astrobiology now took off, it was remarkable that the mud volcanoes in Trinidad and the Pitch Lake could give us insight into what's happening on Mars and one of Saturn's largest moons, Titan, in terms of what were these environments, were they feasible for any kind of life to exist on at all. So there, from data analysis to observational astronomy to astrobiology, those have been some of the key areas that we've been involved in astronomy in research.
Explain how you see the intersection between astronomy and technology.
Astronomy is almost such a difficult science, as old as it is. You are looking for shreds, the tiniest pieces of evidence, and to go out in space itself requires such tremendous technology. And that's why I'm saying that astronomy is equal to technology. I do a lot of outreach work. I talk to from children to persons of all ages, and it didn't take me long to discover that one of the biggest misconceptions out there is what's the difference between astronomy and astrology. I'm an astronomer, and we study the science of what's happening with the heavens, the cosmology, the stars, their behavior, solar system, things like that, and of course now exoplanets. Whereas astrology is the belief that what's happening in the skies has an influence in our lives on Earth. And I have to say that in the astronomical community, that is seen as a pseudoscience.
Tell us about some of your volunteer work over the years.
One of the things that I would tell students who would sign up for one of my courses, which no one has to do, is that one of the most fascinating things in life is when you do what you do not need to do. And as I think back, you know, it goes back to my high school days when I was in school after Form 6. I volunteered at one of the homes in Tacarigua with the children there. And it sort of has always stayed with me, because as I continued working, and I was deputy dean for years and years, I took it with me and one of my colleagues. We raised funds for students in need, as well as children in homes outside of the community. Then I continued to work with children with disabilities. So all of this, I think, was a natural trajectory for me, where a couple years ago, in 2020, I founded, and currently I'm the CEO of the Women in Science for Hope Foundation, the WISH Foundation. And I'll tell you why and what prompted me to do it. I felt I was very blessed in my life growing up. My father was a scientist, as I mentioned, and there were always books around. There was binoculars around. What if I did not have that environment around me and that type of exposure? Would I have become an astronomer?
What were some of the challenges you have had in your career as a woman?
On this very important day of International Day for Women, it is something that I actually reflect upon. And you have to look at the whole thing very holistically, in the sense that I come from a family of 4 daughters. My father said he was king, and we didn't actually see any difference between boys and girls treatment in the home. And we were expected to wash cars, cut grass, and I just took it as normal. And through my career, it was the same attitude I had, that I actually didn't see myself gendered. And being in the Department of Physics, when I started, at the time there were like 9 academic staff, all men, and 1 me there. So I just took it in stride in terms of what are the challenges I had. And what was interesting is that the men expected me to do what they were doing, and I'd be there struggling with some of the telescopes like that. So yet, biologically, we are different. And as I look back now, I realize that thanks to the women on whose shoulders I stand with the whole movement for equality, that we are doing so much better in equality. But today I realize that we do need to actually probably strive towards equity. So when I look back now, I realize that I had challenges that a man, just by nature, no one's fault, just what we are biologically. So have we really addressed that? Because when you are assessed for promotions, awards, or anything, that is not considered. And that is equity. So I don't think that has actually been even begun to look at. And women often have to work twice as hard to get the same rewards as the men.
Do any highlights or successes stand out for you?
I am recipient of about 9 awards in teaching and in research. And then I think very recently came really the icing on the cake. It was so overwhelming for me. It was so humbling. It's when I was appointed as the first professor of astronomy at the University of the West Indies. And I say that and I still get emotional because I didn't have confidence I can do it. I'll be honest with you. I have colleagues and mentors who were like, Shirin, why aren't you applying for the professorship? You need to apply for your professorship. I said, yeah, sure, I will. And I would put it off. And the truth, which I didn't tell them, is that I didn't have the confidence I could do it. So when I did finally power through with it, and the kind of response and the honor that the University of the West Indies gave me is so overwhelming that really the Wish Foundation was born out of two things. A couple years just prior to that, I was recipient of the Anthony Sapka Award, and that's the Caribbean's highest award in science and technology. And that was so overwhelming, and it felt like the region has given so much to me. I mean, from my heart, I've always wanted to, but more than ever, I need to give back. So those are the successes that one sees in the professional line of things. When I receive an award, I often think, they think that this is the hardest thing I've done. No, the hardest thing was at home. My younger daughter has had challenges, and with certain disabilities and so on, and being a single parent. And now my 2 girls are older, of course, and they're thriving well. And that, for me, is my biggest personal success.
How do you suggest girls get into astronomy?
You know, I go out to schools a lot. We also established what's called I'm one of the co-founders of a Caribbean Institute for Astronomy, and they'd have star parties. And this thing would get sold out with like 600 people. And that tells you that right here in Trinidad, the passion, the intrigue for astronomy is heavenly, I would use the word. I go out and talk in schools, and 11-year-olds and 12-year-old girls will come up to me. And one came up to me, and I spoke about my own journey and my own story. And she had tears in her eyes. And she said, Professor Haque, I want to be an astronomer, but everybody at home says that you can't do anything with it. So, so there's a lot of interest, and we have to feed these children. But what's beautiful about astronomy is that it's the gateway to all sciences. So as long as especially girls, and we really need more girls in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, as long as we can keep encouraging them in that, the skies are theirs to behold.
How do you think the rights of women and girls can be protected in digital spaces?
So one of the first points is that cyberspace is real, is as real as physical space. And today, more than ever, the activities, the buying online, advertising your services, everything is existing there. Now, what has happened, and research will show you, is the problems that occurred in physical space have now moved to cyberspace. So the same community of people, women, the LGBTQ community, children, are at more risk than other people in digital space as well. So their rights must be protected. Now what happens, and all of this is data that has been accumulated, still girls and women are using the digital space and digital devices less than men are. So right away there's a disadvantage there. They are not able to function in that space equally. Right? And these are the rights we have to ensure. So what's the answer to this gap that's occurring, a digital divide? And if we don't watch it, it's going to get worse and worse. So the answer is in 2 words: education. Or I should say, what 3 words? Education, 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 but also legislation and policy. We have to protect. I mean, there is bullying, there are all kinds of crimes that occur against women more than against men in the digital space.
Do you think it is important to celebrate International Women's Day annually?
Why it's really important to celebrate these things is because exactly the opportunity I got today. If the International Day of Women's was not recognized and an official day, we will not be having this conversation. Maybe someone out there, some young girl, is able to hear me. So when you bring these things to the forefront, a discussion occurs, awareness occurs, education happens, and it's absolutely essential. There are many courses and so on. Some I've designed and teach. One is history of science. And when you look at the history of science and the role of women in it, they had it really, really rough. So that's why we're not there. We've made huge strides. It's wonderful. I'm very happy to see the strides we've made, but we are not quite there yet. And therefore, until we have equity, that's my new buzzword, rather than even equality, we must continue to recognize and hear the voices of women.
The Office of the Parliament celebrates International Women's Day 2023. DigitALL, innovation and technology for gender equality.